Hey, welcome in. This is the Sacrament of Deconstruction podcast. This is our very first episode. So super excited to be here. My name's Jonathan. I'm joined by my friend Katie, and we are just delighted to be here with you. We have been planning this podcast, it seems like, for what, Katie? Months, years we've talked about this?
Oh, you've been talking about it for a hot minute now, and I was not reluctant to join, just unsure of where I was at. Still am, honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah, we've been thinking about it for a while, and I finally gave in. So, yeah.
Don't love the phrasing there, but we'll move on.
Gave in as in, like, I was worried about the amount of work. Still am, if I'm being honest. But,
Sure.
we just live busy lives, and we don't live in the same state. So, it's a to-do to find the right time to do it.
No, it sure is. It sure is. So, well, with that, I think as we do kind of our first episode, I thought it might be nice to just kind of introduce ourselves a little bit, introduce the project, and see kind of what happens from there. So I'm happy to start. Again, my name is Jonathan. I've been, I was raised Catholic, grew up Catholic, very, very, traditional Hispanic family. And I went to Catholic schools. I even was a seminarian for 3 semesters in college. So I definitely grew up around the Catholic faith and as a Catholic. And it wasn't until I got into adulthood where I started to see some issues with the church and with how I viewed things and where my values stood and where they aligned with the church's. So I have been not practicing as a Catholic now for probably 5 years or so. I would identify myself as an atheist agnostic. I don't know whether or not God exists. I don't know that we can know. And I'm comfortable with that. I'm in a spot where now I'm comfortable with that. So as far as what I want out of this project is, something that Katie and I have talked a lot about is that there's a lot of great channels out there and a lot of great podcasts out there for folks who are deconstructing their faith and creating safe environments for those people. But a lot of them are for ex-evangelicals or even ex-Mormons. I don't see a ton of ex-Catholics in this space. And while I think a lot of those other channels are really great and valuable, I do think that there are some nuances with Catholicism where there's room for conversation specifically with ex-Catholics. So that's me in a very quick nutshell. That's, what I want for the project is really to have a space where Katie and I can talk. We can stay in touch. We've been good friends for a long time. And so this is a great opportunity for that. And also, whoever wants to listen in on our conversations around this stuff, let's do it. So, Katie, turn it over to you.
Awesome. Well, I also grew up Catholic, and I went to Catholic school all the way from kindergarten through high school. I also ended up going to a Catholic university, although, in town, it does have a reputation for being a more liberal Catholic university, which I think is ridiculous in my own opinion. Uh, but I think that's mostly just because I think the connotation for liberal Catholic is a little bit silly to begin with, but when you grow up in a Midwestern parish diocese, like that just happens. But yeah, I grew up in a fairly Catholic environment. My parents weren't as German Catholic as a lot of my peers, so I don't have quite that same experience in my family life, but we were still very much Catholic. It wasn't really till I went through high school that I really started delving in more to my faith and had a lot of questions which were not usually answered, which I always found very frustrating, but I kind of just stuck with it and kept thinking that eventually I would find these answers. And then I went through undergrad, and then I actually pursued a master's in theology, which I completed. And I really thought that was going to give me more answers, but it gave me more questions, which I think is honestly usually pretty typical of anything you study for like large periods of time, is that you realize the more you learn, the less you actually know. And so even though I do have a master's, I do not pretend to be an expert on the subject at all. Like, I think anybody that claims to be an expert on something, and just because there's so many different fields, even within Catholicism, within church history, within theology in general that you could just go so many different ways. So, uh, but that's my background, and I would say that I've had a lot of issues within the church that I personally faced while I was employed with them. Things that really opened my eyes to how much corruption is within the church, which part of is just being naive, and part is just seeing with your own eyes, like, kind of like, how seeing how the sausage is made kind of turns you off to it a little bit. But yeah, I have my own, like, traumatic experiences within the church that definitely made me question a lot of, I guess, how my own faith relates to that, how my view of religion works in the world that we live. And I would say that I right now am in the process of deconstructing my religion. I think I've been in the process of it for a long time, but sometimes it was just too painful to, like, deal with, so I think I just kind of buried it. And unfortunately, it's been kind of rearing its ugly head the last few years, to the point where I am addressing it right now, and I think that I'm not quite sure where I'm at with it. I would say that depending on the day, I'm an atheist, and depending on, you know, the day, I could be much more Catholic feeling. And I think what I struggle with Catholicism is that I see so much corruption and so much that I don't like and that I find very problematic, that it makes it hard for me to sit there and claim to be Catholic. So I think I would say that I'm a hopeful agnostic most of the time, and that I deeply value and find a lot of beauty in Catholicism, but there's a lot that I have trouble with and that I haven't quite been able to reconcile in my own life. So that's sort of where I'm at. And it is a little bit more problematic because, I am married and I have kids that we are currently raising in the faith, but there's all these questions of how do we want to raise them, because we don't want to raise them the same way we were. So that's where I'm at with it and how I'm kind of approaching things. And so you never know what you might get out of me, because I am kind of I'm on really kind of on the fence with a lot of it, and it's a process for me, and I value views on things, and I also can see just from my own history and perspective how it's different. And I think that I think what I want out of this is to give women, I think, a view of the church, or like give them a voice that I think is really missing, because the Catholic Church is so male dominant. Like, I know they kind of pretend there's female spaces, but I really don't think there is sometimes. And I don't think that especially if those voices dissent in any way, I feel like they're very quickly silenced. So that's sort of where I want to be, is I want to be that voice for women in the church. And that doesn't, maybe I won't actually end up in the church. I don't know. But that's sort of where I am, and wanting to be, I guess, that voice for people that have problems with it and see it, and, like, just know that they're not alone. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I think something that I want to really make clear to anyone who may be listening out there is that, we're not here to convert or deconvert anyone. I'm a little further along in my journey than Katie is, and I think that's fine. But again, we're here to talk, we're here to have conversations, we're here to explore ideas. Does not mean that, I'm not open to having my mind changed. I like to think anyway that I'm open-minded, and that if I came across either a good enough argument or a compelling enough reason to believe again, that I would. Believe me, I wish desperately that I could believe. It would make my life quite a bit easier. And that's something that I'm sure we'll get into in future episodes. So, as we kind of wrap up here today, what other closing thoughts did you have, Katie, or anything that you want to address as we wrap up our first episode?
I think I would just say that I think the direction that we want to take this podcast is not, it's very open. I think that we want to talk about a lot of the things that we've struggled with in the church, everything from, like, its teachings on sexuality to the problem of evil and suffering in the world, and how we address those things, or frankly find them very difficult to address. I think even instances of church abuse um, is something that is very much needed to be talked about in the podcast, just because I think that it's something that's very prevalent in the news today and the things that Catholics are seeing. And not just Catholics, I think in general Christians all over see it. But I think it has a unique, um, I guess, a unique sort of suffering, and it's more problematic in some ways in the Catholic Church just because of the way the power structure is designed. And so I think, yeah, we have a lot of things that, yeah, we want to talk about, and nothing is really off the table. And we'll bring in, I think, our own examples. We might even like read things from other Catholic perspectives. So I mean, yeah, I think that's kind of where we're at, and I think our opinions on things might change as we go. I expect mine probably will on certain things. Like, I mean, my opinion changes on things fairly frequently. Not so much my opinion, but like my understanding or my viewpoint on it continues to grow. And I think the more I go through the journey, the more I am okay with that, I guess, lack of certainty, and just realizing that as long as we're pursuing good and truth, I think that in general, I think we're doing good in the world and doing good for ourselves as well. And I think to just remain stagnant is generally more problematic than not pursuing things. And I think that's what we want to do with this podcast, is make people feel like they are capable and allowed to pursue these things, because I think that was my biggest fear when I had a lot of these questions, was I felt like I was not allowed to ask these difficult and troubling questions. So having a space to do that and making others feel like they have a space to do that and know that we probably don't have the answers. We're just here to kind of facilitate the questions themselves and discuss them and feel like we're allowed to.
Yeah, thank you. I think the thing that I wanted to add, and as we close out, this is the first time that either of us have done anything like this. So just ask that you give us some grace as we go, which I recognize is a funny thing to say on a kind of ex-Catholic podcast. But, give us some grace. We are reasonably technologically savvy, but neither of us are IT people by any stretch of the imagination. So, we have plans to get mics. We have plans to improve on some of the audio and stuff like that already, just kind of as we go, and, have Black Friday deals and stuff like that. So I think just give us the grace on the technology side and also on the conversation side. Again, this is a conversation, I hope that we have folks who are able to comment and have conversations, keep things respectful. I am not afraid to, delete a comment that is offensive or excessively combative, But I think if we're having conversations with each other in good faith, like Katie, kind of said, it's a good in and of itself. So that kind of wraps us up here for today. Really excited that you're here with us and really happy that you decided to spend a little time with us. We will be back soon with another edition. Y'all have a great night. Bye.